Mia Carter had always believed her life was perfect: a loving husband, a sister she trusted with her life, and a home filled with laughter. But that evening, as she returned from work, she found a message on David's phone that made her heart freeze. It wasn't just a text, it was proof. A proof that the people she loved most were planning to destroy her from the inside. Mia stepped into the quiet house, the familiar scent of coffee and vanilla filling the air, but her instincts screamed that something was off. David wasn't there. Olivia, her younger sister, greeted her with that warm, familiar smile, but something in her eyes seemed different. Her phone buzzed. Another message from David, short, cryptic: "Don't worry about anything. Everything's fine." Mia felt a chill. The words seemed innocent enough, but the tone screamed deception. For weeks, she had brushed off the small signs, the late nights, the secretive calls, the small lies that seemed meaningless at the time. But now, staring at that message, everything clicked. She remembered the secret glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the room. She remembered Olivia insisting she shouldn't worry about trivial things, and suddenly the world she had built with love and trust came crashing down. That night, Mia stayed awake, scrolling through David's messages, her hands trembling, and there it was, the undeniable truth: her husband and her sister, together, betraying her, laughing behind her back, planning every step to break her. She dropped the phone, tears streaming down her face. The betrayal wasn't just an act of love gone wrong, it was deliberate, calculated, and personal. Mia's world had been poisoned by the people she trusted the most, and in that moment she made a silent vow: she wouldn't be broken. Not by them, not by anyone. I dropped my phone, my hands trembling, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. David, my husband, and Olivia, my own sister, my family, had betrayed me. Every smile, every hug, every whispered word of love I had trusted suddenly felt like a lie. My world, built on trust, had shattered in an instant. I sat in the quiet living room, sunlight streaming through the blinds, my mind racing. Every subtle sign I had ignored over the past weeks made sense now. David's late-night phone calls, his sudden work trips, Olivia's cryptic comments, the way she would glance away when I entered the room. Every little thing had been part of a carefully hidden plan. I knew I couldn't just cry or break down. My heart hurt, yes, but I had to regain control. I had to understand what had happened and what I needed to do next. I started piecing everything together in my mind, collecting the proof I had: screenshots, messages, photos. Every attempt they had made to explain themselves, to justify their actions, to present some kind of innocent reasoning was meaningless. I could see through it all. They had been clever, trying to cover their tracks, pretending to care, offering explanations, excuses, and empty reassurances. But I understood now. It was deliberate. Every act, every word, every gesture that I had trusted had been carefully manipulated. I realized that the life I thought I had was built on deception. I spent hours reflecting, tears streaming at times, but slowly I felt a fire building inside me. This betrayal, as devastating as it was, had awakened something stronger. I wouldn't crumble. I wouldn't let them win. I needed to take back control of my life. I shared everything with my best friend, Rachel, telling her all the hidden details. Even without their voices, I could recount how David and Olivia had tried to explain themselves, their feeble attempts at appearing innocent. It didn't matter. I had seen the truth. I started planning. Every text, every email, every suspicious behavior became part of my strategy. Their attempts to justify themselves became my roadmap, proof of their deceit and arrogance. I understood the patterns, the timing, the lies. Every small explanation they had ever offered only confirmed the depth of their betrayal. Even though they were clever and probably believed they could anticipate my reaction, I felt ready, stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. Every tiny detail that they thought was hidden, every moment they had taken for granted, was now my advantage. I made a silent promise to myself. They thought I would break, they thought I would run, but every move they made, every lie, every excuse only made me stronger. I will reclaim my life, and this is only the beginning. This was the end of that chapter. I was no longer the woman who had cried alone in her bedroom the night before. I was ready, ready to act, ready to take back what they had tried to destroy, and ready to make them realize that betraying me was their biggest mistake. After the shock of discovering their betrayal, I spent the next few days silently observing David and Olivia. From the outside, I seemed calm, composed, even grieving, but inside I was sharp, alert, and planning. Every glance, every whisper, every attempt they made to justify themselves only reinforced my determination. They didn't know I had begun collecting everything: texts, emails, hidden messages, photos, carefully recording their actions without them realizing. Every attempt at innocent explanations they had offered earlier became evidence of their arrogance. Every excuse, every defensive gesture was now a piece of the puzzle I was slowly putting together. I knew I had to be patient. Acting impulsively would ruin everything. I couldn't afford to let anger control me. I had to wait for the perfect moment to make my first move. I analyzed their habits, their routines, even their subtle ways of communicating. I memorized patterns, noted inconsistencies, and imagined every possible scenario. The first opportunity came sooner than I expected. David suggested a weekend getaway, claiming it was to repair our relationship. I knew better. I knew it was a lie, a chance for him and Olivia to continue hiding their deception away from everyone. But instead of avoiding it, I decided to use it to my advantage. I packed a small bag, seemingly innocent, but I hid my phone, my recorder, and copies of all the messages I had gathered. I let them believe I was unaware, that I was still naive and trusting, but in reality, I was ready. Every step they took, every whispered word, I was prepared to capture. During that weekend, I silently recorded conversations, every subtle detail revealing their true intentions. I didn't confront them. This wasn't the time for drama. This was about strategy. By the end of the trip, I had gathered enough evidence to make them accountable. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt at justification was documented. When I returned home, I didn't announce my findings. I waited. I let my calm exterior mask the storm inside me. Slowly, subtly, I began exposing certain things to people around them without revealing myself. Friends and family started questioning their integrity, noticing inconsistencies that David and Olivia had never imagined anyone would see. I realized something powerful. My strength wasn't in confrontation, it was in patience, in silence, in letting them underestimate me. Every arrogant smile they wore, every confident glance now worked against them. They were slowly losing control without even knowing it. I often reflected on what had happened, letting the anger fuel my focus. They thought I would break, they thought I would run, but every move they make now only strengthens me. I am reclaiming my life, and this time I will do it on my terms. By the time the weekend was over, I felt a sense of empowerment I had never experienced before. I had struck my first blow, not directly, but decisively. The balance of power was shifting. David and Olivia had no idea that I was no longer the same woman who had trusted them blindly. The real battle was just beginning. I knew that exposing them too quickly could backfire. I had to remain patient, precise, and strategic. As I watched them try to maintain their composure, I knew that the game of minds, the ultimate test of control, manipulation, and revenge, was about to escalate. After the weekend trip, something inside me had completely changed. I was no longer the woman who waited for answers. I was the woman who already had them. Every piece of evidence I had collected sat quietly in my possession, like silent witnesses waiting for the right moment to speak. But I had learned something important over the past weeks. Truth, when revealed too quickly, can sometimes be ignored. Truth needs the right moment. So I waited. And while I waited, I watched. David continued acting as if everything in our marriage was normal. From the outside, he looked like the same caring husband people had always believed him to be. He smiled at the right moments, said the right things, and carried himself with the same confidence he always had. But I could see the small cracks now, the slight hesitation in his voice, the way he checked his phone more often than before, the way his eyes avoided mine when our conversations became too quiet. He didn't know that I knew everything. And Olivia? She was even more confident than before. For years, she had been the sister who people described as charming, warm, and trustworthy. She knew how to walk into a room and make people believe every word she said. But the more I observed her, the more I realized something interesting. Confidence often grows when someone believes their secret is safe, and Olivia believed exactly that. She moved through family gatherings with the same ease she always had, laughing, sharing stories, acting as though nothing had changed between us. Whenever I looked at her, I wondered if she ever thought about what she had done. Not just the betrayal, but the fact that she had chosen to destroy the person who trusted her the most. Still, I remained silent, because silence had become my greatest weapon. Over the next few weeks, I started placing small pieces of truth into the world around them, not enough to expose everything, just enough to create doubt. A message forwarded anonymously, a timeline that didn't quite match the story they had told others, a quiet hint that made people look twice at situations they once ignored. And slowly, the atmosphere around them began to change. I could see it in the way certain friends spoke to David now, more cautious, less trusting. I could see it in the subtle tension whenever Olivia entered a room where certain family members were already talking. They didn't know where the doubts were coming from, but the doubts were growing, and that was exactly what I wanted, because the truth becomes far more powerful when people start discovering parts of it themselves. Some nights I sat alone reviewing the recordings and messages I had saved. Each one reminded me of the moment my life had shattered, but strangely, those memories no longer made me feel weak. They made me feel focused. Every lie they had told, every secret they believed was hidden, all of it had become the foundation of something they could no longer control. My plan wasn't about destroying them in one sudden moment. It was about letting the truth slowly surround them until there was nowhere left to hide. And that moment was getting closer. One evening during another quiet family dinner, I noticed something that confirmed everything I had suspected. David and Olivia were becoming nervous. They still tried to act normal, but their confidence wasn't the same anymore. There were brief glances between them, small pauses in their conversations, moments where they looked around the room as if searching for something they couldn't see. For the first time since their betrayal began, they were starting to feel the pressure. They just didn't understand where it was coming from. And I sat there calmly, watching it unfold. Later that night, when I returned home, I placed the small recorder on the table in front of me. Inside that device were the conversations from the weekend trip, the truth they believed had remained hidden. I held it in my hand and realized something important. Until now, everything had been preparation, but soon preparation would turn into action, and once that happened, nothing would ever be the same again. I took a deep breath and looked around the quiet room. Months ago, I would have been terrified of what came next, but now I felt something different: clarity, strength, control. They believed they had already won, I thought quietly, but they never understood something about me. I may have been broken, but I was never defeated. The truth was no longer just a secret I carried. It was a storm waiting to break. And very soon, when the moment was right, the world around David and Olivia would finally see what I had seen all along. Because the next move I was about to make wouldn't happen in silence, and when it happened, there would be no way for them to escape it. By the time everything was ready, I knew there was no turning back. For weeks, I had watched the slow cracks forming in David and Olivia's world, the quiet doubts, the nervous glances, the subtle tension that followed them everywhere. They still believed their secret was safe, but the truth was no longer just something I carried inside me. It had grown too big to stay hidden, and the moment to reveal it had finally arrived. I had spent days carefully preparing for this step. Every recording, every message, every piece of proof had been organized. Nothing was left to chance. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about truth, and truth deserves to be seen. The opportunity came during another family gathering, one of those evenings where everyone sits together, sharing stories, pretending life is simple and ordinary. The room was filled with laughter and conversations. From the outside, it looked like any other normal evening. David moved through the room confidently, greeting people, smiling the way he always did. Olivia stood nearby, carrying the same charm that had convinced everyone for years that she was trustworthy. But this time, something was different. I wasn't the same woman sitting in that room anymore. I wasn't the one living inside their lie. I was the one holding the truth. And the weight of that truth was about to change everything. For a moment, I simply watched them. I studied their expressions, their movements, the way they spoke to others as if nothing had ever happened. It amazed me how easily people could hide behind normalcy. But secrets have a strange way of demanding to be revealed. Sooner or later, they surface. And that night, the truth finally began to rise. I stood up slowly, feeling an unexpected calm inside me. The anger that once burned in my chest had disappeared. In its place was something much stronger: clarity. I knew that once the truth came out, my life would never return to what it once was. But I also knew something else. Living inside a lie was far more painful than facing the truth. The evidence I had collected, the recordings, the messages, the timelines, contained everything that had been hidden for months. Every secret meeting, every lie, every moment of betrayal. For a long time, I had carried that knowledge alone, but not anymore. The truth had waited patiently. Now it was finally ready to be seen. As the evening continued, I noticed the familiar tension returning to David and Olivia's behavior. They were beginning to sense that something was wrong. Their confidence had faded. Their movements were less certain. Somewhere deep inside, they knew the moment they had feared was approaching. And for the first time since everything began, they no longer looked in control. I felt the quiet strength growing inside me. For months, they had believed I was weak. They had believed their lies would break me. But they were wrong. Pain had changed me. It had sharpened my awareness. It had forced me to see people exactly as they were. And now the truth stood between us like a mirror no one could look away from. I realized something important in that moment. Revenge had never really been the goal. Revenge fades quickly, but truth stays. Truth forces people to face the consequences of their choices, and that was exactly what was about to happen. The storm that had been building quietly for so long was finally breaking. Their lies could no longer protect them. Their secrets could no longer hide. Everything they had tried so hard to bury was now standing in the open. And I stood there calmly, knowing that the woman who had once been betrayed had finally taken back her life, not through anger, not through destruction, but through courage. Because in the end, the most powerful thing a person can do after betrayal is refuse to remain silent. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see when the pain first began. Betrayal doesn't just break you, it reveals you. It shows you your strength, your resilience, and your ability to rise from something that once felt impossible to survive. David and Olivia believed they were writing the end of my story, but they were wrong. They had only written the chapter that forced me to become stronger. And as I walked away from that chapter, I realized for the first time in months, I wasn't walking away in defeat. I was walking forward, free.